So today is a very special day for us because we have a wonderful guest with us, and I'll now go live also on the webinar as we begin to welcome all the people who have registered for the special meeting this evening. It's a very, very special day because we have a very unique individual with us. I think Amit, I've heard a lot about him over the years. And the story that stayed with me the most was that here was a person who at a very young age, one day had this thought strike him that I have been fortunate. I have made enough financial wealth for myself. And from this point onwards in my life, I have to think about using this wealth and all the capacity given to me to serve the well-being of others. And I was very touched by hearing the story. I don't really know the actual story. I'm sure Amit will tell us more about it. But first of all, Amit, very, very warm welcome to you to this particular digital series.
Namaste, and thank you so much, Anil, for inviting me to be here with everyone.
Thank you. And we have my co-host, Priyam. So Priyam, would you introduce yourself to everybody, please?
So good evening. Glad to be here. What a wonderful opportunity. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm Priyam Bhargava. I'm an alum from SOIL. I have around 13 years of experience. Currently, I'm working in a fintech as a product manager. And I've mostly been in HR, manufacturing, nonprofits in my previous avatars. Glad to be here.
And there's an award we give annually to students. That award, one of the names mentioned, that is called the SPV award, and P stands for Priyam, because Priyam had a significant challenge in her life. You know, she got cancer at a young age, and the way she dealt with it and the way she led her life was an extraordinarily courageous story. So, you know, Priyam, thank you for who you are, and thank you for enabling SOIL to honor you and naming students every year in your name. So what a wonderful gift.
It's an honor that I which is larger than me. So I'm truly humbled by it. I've never imagined that this would actually be something that, there's a legacy. But my two co-partners were definitely more courageous than I was.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amit, let's ask you the question, how did it all begin? Tell us about the early part of your life, your upbringing, people who really shaped you as a person. Help us to understand where it all began.
Anil, I think I've been really fortunate to have been instilled a great sense of values by my parents, particularly my mother. Very early on, I don't think we had any ability to really give money, but we were always encouraged to be generally giving in terms of our nature with our time. And so we, all of our siblings, try to give as much as possible of ourselves very early on, even when we were students. I was that in my life, I was able to get scholarships for my higher education. In my third year of engineering, I got a scholarship, from Larsen & Toubro, and that didn't escape me. I spent a few years with Larsen & Toubro while I was doing my engineering, and then after I graduated, I again worked for them for a few years. And then I really wanted to do my MBA, and I wanted to go. And I would never have been able to go overseas if it. And so that, again, never escaped me, that there were people who were extraordinarily generous, who I never knew, who basically were willing to fund people who are hungry for education. When I went to the US, I was really fascinated when I looked around that there were extraordinary institutions around me, schools, universities, libraries, hospitals. Everywhere I looked, it amazed me that there were institutions built by donors. And so the remained with me that when that I must be more giving. I came back to India in 1993, and just within a year, I got married. Um, and my wife and I decided that as soon as we got married, that even though we didn't have much, we started staying as paying guests. We couldn't afford to rent a house. That we will start giving right from them. And naturally, because I was the beneficiary of education, I was a product of education, that we started actually giving back.
How very nice. So it's started from that moment onwards, and you.
Yes.
Thank you. This whole thought about taking responsibility for the way we live now, which means somewhere you started as you started becoming professionally, you started advancing your career. In some respects, something started happening to you. And could you describe the moment when you said, now more than giving in just a more general way, I have to do something specific for some problem that I deeply care about? Could you talk
Yeah.
about that moment when it happened to you? Yes.
Yeah. So Anil, I'm a very goal-oriented person. Um, when I came back to India, I had actually set up a goal for myself. I was very young in my, um, mid-20s when I came back after my MBA. And so I set up this really big, huge goal for myself that by the time I was 40, I wanted to run a large company and I wanted to be a crorepati. Uh, Oddly enough, I was really, I think, lucky. Maybe I was at the right place at the right time. That in my early 30s, I found myself achieving my goal. Um, I joined DSP Merrill Lynch very early on. Investment banking seemed to be the right place at the right time. I rose through the ranks, unlike most people who were hopping jobs. I never hopped a job. And so I had the opportunity to lead the bank, and the bank, landed up being the number one investment bank in the country. And so, I had this extraordinary opportunity to really partake in building a leading financial services institution at an extraordinary, point in India's economic history. Financially, that was extremely rewarding as well, because as opposed to trying to make 1 crore of savings in my life, I was making that in a year. Uh, you know, uh, by the time I was, in my early 30s. But at some point of time, I realized that as my wife and I were spending more time in the social sector, because we had started giving more and more every year, that there was much more of joy that we were getting by being engaged uh, with people in that sector. There was more enduring satisfaction that we were getting from um, trying to solve some of those problems there. And in fact, oddly enough, when I was at the peak of my career as an investment banker, I actually felt a sense of real emptiness. Uh, I remember going to my guru, Hemendra Kothari, who was the chairman of our firm, right at the peak of my career, and telling him I wanted to take a sabbatical or a break, because I felt maybe success had come to me too early, and I didn't know what would be next. I couldn't see what would really keep challenging me. It was a horrible feeling to have as a young professional. He actually felt it was male menopause that hit me too early. But um, I actually took a sabbatical. I did things like Vipassana early on in life. And I realized that I needed to maybe reinvent myself. I decided to seek a second career, which was a very sensible thing to do. I decided I'll spend maybe 2 more years as a banker at that point of time. I made the very unusual choice to give up what I was, the only thing I knew I was good at, which was investment banking, and become a private equity professional. But I also decided at that point of time I would spend a lot more time in the social sector. And that's when I decided to join Bain Capital and make a material time shift to the social sector by spending much more time there and spending much more money there.
So amongst the issues that you were looking at, which problems appealed to you that that's something you want to take responsibility for, and how did you decide that focus?
Yeah, Anil, that has been really a moving target. What we look at right now is not what we've looked at historically. Our thoughts have changed over the years. So I would not claim to be a visionary who has had clarity of thinking through my life on what social problems I want to solve. Very early on this journey, I was very clear that I wanted to basically solve education, and that education was the panacea to all of India's problems. It may well be that that is the case today as well. But at some point of time, I decided that even if that is the case, I needed to actually spend my time and money in areas that were far more underserved. And so we decided to make a shift, many years ago towards rural development and actually capacity building, which is to, providing the building blocks for all other sectors, problem solving in all other sectors. Because we felt that those were areas that weren't actually getting attention. And that's what I've been doing now for many years now. It's not to say that education is not important. A lot of my historic work has been in education. I continue to spend a lot of time in higher education, in particular Ashoka University. But increasingly, I would say the bulk of my work is now in these two areas.
Right. Amongst all the things that have been done through you, because I believe that you become an instrument, that these things are done through you, right? Amongst all the things that have been done through you, what is that one aspect that you and your team did that gives you the maximum joy and happiness, which gives you tremendous satisfaction when all of you were at your personal best and your happiest best?
I get asked this a lot, and it's like choosing favorites amongst children or siblings. I'm not so sure there's a good answer to it. We've been truly fortunate to have worked with extraordinary partners because we are not an implementing organization. We partner with extraordinary people and organizations to do what we do. We've actually made some amazing early stage bets, which we have seen grow into banyan trees. Ashoka University started from one room when we got involved with it, and today, it is regarded as a great university. Olympic Gold Quest, which is producing Olympic winners for India, was with a plan on a piece of paper when we started getting engaged with it. We are trying to build a movement for Water for Farmers, which, has now touched 4,000 villages. And, we started with the first village. I think there's one where, which is in the same area that you were involved in, where we are actually trying to provide knowledge and leadership skills to social sector leaders, because we believe if you provide tools to social sector leaders, that's really valuable. So we've already been working with partners, 10 partners so far, who have trained 5,000 social sector leaders. Our theory of change there is that if you empower social sector leaders, you'll empower the social sector itself. So we work with Harvard Business School, we work with Ashoka, we work with ISDM, we work with IM Bangalore, we work with 5 other partners, Dasra, who basically every year work with hundreds of social sector leaders who just upgrade their skills in order for them to do extraordinary work, because everyone has great expectations from social sector leaders. How do you make sure that they deliver them? So I would say there's lots that we've tried to do, but I do think that we are still on a scale of 0 to 10. We are probably at 2. We moved from 0 to 2, so we've come a long way. But I think we still have to go from 2 to 10. So we still have to go a very long way.
What did you discover in yourself, Amit, as the gifts that you have? Out of all these things that you did, what did you discover early about what is it that you do exceptionally well?
The biggest thing I discovered, Anil, is that I thought when I started doing this that I would actually be able to change a lot of things. And as Rumi said, I thought the biggest change actually comes in you yourself. I think so. I keep telling people that if you want to really try to give, you do it for yourself. Be selfish and do it for yourself. Don't try to do it for the world. Don't try to do it for anyone else. Do this because you need to do it for yourself first. And I think that is the first and biggest lesson I learned along the way. Originally, when I started it, I had this great notion that I was going to change the world. I realized that at some point of time, I was, changing myself more than anything else. I'm still on that journey. You need to take a lot of ego out of yourself. The social sector is far more difficult than the corporate world. I even now struggle and grapple with issues in the social sector. I've been on corporate boards. I've been on the board of Tata Sons. I've been on the board of Piramal Enterprises. I've been on, boards of other large organizations, international. I've been on international boards of New York Stock Exchange listed companies. I can tell you without doubt, I struggle with social sector issues like, like anything. Okay, they are far more complicated than anything else. And, so you realize, how much you need to apply yourself and remove your ego. Every day you fall and you have to get up the next morning and clean the dirt and walk the road again. And so it is a very humbling exercise, to traverse that journey. It's also satisfying because then when you see change, it is deeply, deeply satisfying. But change is often difficult, and it takes much longer. So it teaches you patience as well.
Amit, building upon this, when you are honoring this urge inside yourself to focus on a particular aspect, and you said it is in your own self-interest to do that. You're not doing it only to improve the world. In a way, this is giving you tremendous amount of learning and satisfaction, and you're doing that. But at the same time, what is it that which comes through you where you have to also behave like a social architect. I believe that leadership is more like social architecture, which is like inviting the right people around the right questions. So how do you choose how to invite the right questions around the right issues? What is that process in your mind and with your colleagues?
I think the the process of asking the right questions is a logic framework that is not very different from what we learn in the corporate world. I think that is one. There are few things that you do carry that I've learned you can carry from one sector to the other. There's not many things you can carry from the corporate world to the social sector. In fact, there are some things you can carry from the social sector to the corporate world. Sense of empathy being probably the most paramount. But logic frameworks is one of the things that you can carry. In fact, I think that is something which is often lacking in the social sector enormously. I keep telling people we'd love to combine head and heart a lot more in the social sector. And so, just having that training, and that's something that, being an engineer by background, I find that very valuable. Just being able to kind of think in a particular way, how to approach a problem. To think in just logically, first principles, approach it. Analyze it in the right way. If one thing doesn't work, just think about other angles. It's something which is, I think, very useful, and we're taught that in engineering school to do that. And I think, and then have lateral thinking. Again, that's something that you're also taught, right? I mean, so there's linear thinking, there's lateral thinking, there's outer box thinking. So you try one approach, second approach, third approach, right? I think all of these are things which are often very, very useful.
Mm-hmm. Now tell me another thing, that when you are creating this whole impact, and very often these problems are quite complex when you work in the social sector. One of the very interesting challenges we face, especially in our country, is how to get people to come together and have dialogue across differences. And I've seen that this is a particularly difficult part, how to develop that statesmanship. Look at what's happening in the farmers' issue in this country, right? So it's a complex problem, and I think we find that there are a lot of things in our country get impacted because we don't have that basic skill to have dialogue across differences. How do you develop this in people, and how do you develop this kind of capability in the leaders that you convene together and you help in capacity building?
Yeah, Anil, I think you've raised a very, very important, issue. I think, in most situations, I've realized it begins a little bit with, first of all, it begins with trust. I think people need to have some basic trust in each other. If they think that someone has some ulterior motive to do something, then I think the process there itself starts getting stuck. Often you start second guessing each other from there itself. Why are you doing this? Becomes the first question that gets asked. So I think often you need to kind of figure out how to build trust if there's trust which is lacking. People don't make that investment. The second issue is you do need to, leave room to, facilitate dialogue. If there, in the absence of facilitating dialogue, if you straight away try to, get to a decision, I've realized, then that decision, even if it is right, unfortunately doesn't, land up having some sort of endurance, some sort of sustainability. And so I think, you come from the corporate world. This is what we call consensus building. You need to go through that process of trying to, get critical mass. There'll be a tipping point that you will reach, at which, there will be enough of consensus in the room that even it's very, very difficult to get 100% people on your side, but you get that, tipping point where you'll have enough people on your side that the rest of them will really tip over. But you have to make that investment in that process. And you need to know what's the reasonable time for that process. But I think often, sometimes we don't invest in that process. But process is really, really important. I think in corporates, we realize that. And I think in the social sector as well, I think you realize that process is actually really important. Often in the social sector, by the way, people don't have great processes. And so we do try to invest in process wherever possible. I think if you take care of trust and you take care of process, I think then you can actually go a very, very, very long way. And I think I always taking the ego out of anything, I think helps go a very, very long way in my view.
Excellent. Amit, what has been the single most difficult situation or challenge or a low moment you have faced in your life, and how did you deal with that, and what did you learn out of that?
No, I've had a lot of low moments in my life. I think, Anil, people often just think of me as someone who's had success in in three different areas of my life, and I tell people it's not that. I have a lot of scars on my back in each of those areas. And in fact, I also tell people that I have actually learned a lot more from the failures than I have from success. Success has taught me very little in my life. It's actually my failures which have taught me a lot more. The failures have taught me humility. They have taught me, other things which have been far more valuable. Success actually just blows a lot of air in your head, and attracts a lot of people who, who you otherwise would be fair weather friends. You come to know who your real friends are when things are down. I would say the challenges, there have been, the worst things I've had are being cheated by people you trust, and then you realize your judgment calls were wrong, and then you learn how to be more sophisticated with your judgment calls, that you were too trusting. I've been cheated in my life, and I've learned how to be a little bit more sensible with how I deal with people. I've been let down by people with whom I've had very good relationships with, who have second guessed me. That hurts, become very people person. And I think that has made me, feel really let down, and feel low. And I would say, but I've always tried to bounce back and come out of these things and move forward.
Very nice. One last question, and my request to the audience is you can start typing your questions in the Q&A box and or the chat box. So one last thing from my side before Priyam takes over the process of engaging with the audience. If you were to lead, Amit, your life all over again, and sometimes I ask myself that question as well, what part of your life would you do differently? What is there something you would like to relive in a different way than what you have done?
I have, Anil, I have no regrets in life, and the only one thing I would do a little bit more differently is I would bring a little bit more discipline to my life on one aspect, which is, I would lead my life slightly more in a more balanced way in terms of investing in my health at an early stage. That is a muscle that you need to develop early on in life. We have a mutual friend, Keval Nauriaji, who's like a mentor to me. And I really admire him for how disciplined he is with how he takes care of his health. Uh, you know, and it's a habit that you need to inculcate. I've seen lots of very successful people do that early on in their life, how they eat, how they exercise. I'm now trying to do it when I've hit 50. I wish I would have started that when I was 25.
Thank you very much. Priyam, you may want to now ask a question on your own behalf and then on behalf of the audience. Priyam, over to you.
Sure, thank you. First of all, it was amazing listening to the journey. And I love the fact that, you went from a complete hardcore investment banking right into the lap of the social sector, which is an amazing journey to hear about. I have had my own stints with the nonprofit early on in my career. One of the things that I kept on struggling with is the whole fact of succession planning in nonprofits. Uh, Little context, in 94, when that entire FCRA opened up and investment and donations started coming in, funding started coming in, a lot of nonprofits had started off by brilliant people, passionate people, completely lacking process, but beautiful ideas were coming where a lot of impact, but most of them struggle with succession planning. What would be your message to them? Do you see this as a real problem for the social sector?
Yeah, Priyam. Actually, I think succession planning is a interesting problem both for the corporate sector and the social sector. I can tell you that the corporate world is no different from the social sector. People don't do great succession planning in the corporate sector either. And in the social sector as well, my own experience has been, that boards, in fact, are unfortunately less engaged in the social sector than they are even in the corporate sector. And so this has been a big problem in the social sector. We need to do a far better job. Donors need to basically ask hard questions, particularly the large donors, as to what the succession plan of an organization is. When they basically are writing particularly large multi-year grants. If it's a one-year grant, I think it's okay because, it doesn't matter, the visibility, for your money is a short term. But if you're writing a multi-year grant, I think people should ask hard questions about these issues in my mind. I think organizations, some of the larger organizations have definitely got much better at this. I've seen over the years. My wife, for example, Archana, succession plan was forced onto her of one of the largest intellectual disability organizations in the country. And she was very lucky, and the organization was very lucky that, she developed. Sorry, it would have been a real problem if things wouldn't have shaped up properly.
Right.
You may now read out questions from the Q&A box, Priyam.
Yeah. Thank you for that response, Amit. We'll start with one question that is coming from Pradeep Malik. He's referring to when you mentioned how giving is more about being selfish and doing it for yourself. He wants you to just elaborate on that a bit.
Sorry, can you repeat your question again with a little bit of break?
No problem. So this question comes from Pradeep Malik. He's asked us, Can you elaborate on the whole be selfish and do it for yourself, referring to when you were talking about giving, and it's more about a benefit to yourself. Amit, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, my apologies.
No.
My point was very simple, that I have no doubt that we need to basically give money and time to impact society around us. We need to be a more giving society. By doing so, we will, be able to make tremendous difference, and that will, that at the end of the day, we will see the world that we want to see around us. I have no doubt about that. But the point that I was trying to make is that in that process of change, the joy of giving is actually an enduring sense of joy that one accomplishes, and that one feels a sense of accomplishment for oneself. Okay. You can look at the end of the day, we as individuals, as human beings, when we spend money, right, on anything, be it a material thing that we gather for ourselves, right, or we spend it on impacting someone's life, or we spend it, let's say, on improving pollution in Delhi, right? All those are choices that we make, correct? The question is that each of those gives you a sense of satisfaction. You have to, you will decide at the end of the day, you will get a sense over time as to what gives you the most enduring sense of satisfaction, is the point that I was saying. My own experience, at least, has been, and I would say that for most people, I've realized over time, whoever I've spoken to who's embarked on this journey and stayed with it, that the most, deepest form of satisfaction is when you impact society around you. And that's that's the joy of giving, right? Sure, I mean, there's some basic comforts that one needs, and one should fulfill those basic comforts. If you are uncomfortable, you will never basically, experience the joy of giving. But once you're, basically comfortable, and there's, by the way, research on this. Harvard has published some research on it. Yale has published, you can read it. Beyond a point, material comforts start, having a law of diminishing returns. The question is, what does one do with excess wealth beyond that? That wealth, if you start then, impacting lives around you, you basically start you're feeling a sense of joy. And whatever those causes are, as long as those causes appeal to you, you then start, realizing that you have basically impacted society around you, and that's your legacy. And that's the point I was saying. It becomes a selfish sense of joy, and that joy belongs to you.
True. Thank you for that. The next question is from Rama Raju, who says, please help me understand why the social sector is largely influenced by NGOs rather than educational institutions. Is there any strong reason for that? Why do we see fewer educational institutions impacting the social sector more than non-profits with a cause?
No, I don't think that. I'm trying to figure out. That's not the case. I think, it depends on which vertical you look at. I mean, for example, I work in many verticals in which educational institutions don't necessarily play a role. In the education vertical, NGOs as well as educational institutions, obviously, both of them play a role. But in many other verticals, education institutions play a very small role. So I think it's different for different verticals. But I do think that educational institutions need to be strengthened so that they can play a much more robust role in various verticals. This has been a lost opportunity. So it's a very good question. It's a lost opportunity in India. The reason for this is that we have not strengthened our education institutions to be research based, to be apprenticeship based, the way institutions, for example, in the US are. So in US, if you want to do work in water, you will essentially, work with your local university. There will be a professor who's deeply interested in water. She will, have engage with a bunch of students. Those students will take the theoretical knowledge that they are studying, will go and do research in their local villages, and they will make it a project along with maybe an NGO who's a partner. And that basically provides a richness of experience to the students as well. And, you result in something really interesting, which is value to society as well. This doesn't happen that much in India. It's true about our engineering institutions as well. How many engineering institutions are solving problems that are relevant to society in India? Not much. So it's true about social problems. It's true about engineering problems. We just don't have robust problem solving and research happening in our education institutions. It needs to happen a lot more. For that, you need more budgets in our educational institutions. You need more outward facing faculty. You need a change in orientation. So it's definitely a big opportunity.
True, I completely agree. If I look back, we probably had an SUP, social service class, and practicals for the science classes, which really weren't practicals. They were just very platonic practices. I think something that we ultimately only face at SOIL was really applying what we're learning across. Going on to the next question, we had a question which said, which asked you that what are the 2-3 things in the social sector that need to become more efficient? And this is from Khurshid.
Khurodi. Khurshid and Naushad Khurodi, whom you know well, Amit. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Pleasure to have them on the call. Look, I think like every other, like the corporate world, I think there are lots of opportunities for the social sector to step up as well. In my mind, I think some of the areas where there's definitely an opportunity for the social sector to get a step up would be measurement and evaluation is one big area where I think there's an opportunity. I mean, in the corporate world, if you think about it, we've been really successful because everything has come down to our ability to measure things and crystallize them into simple metrics. Okay, it's not that easy in the social world, right? By the way, because things are extremely complex, and it's not often that easy to crystallize them into few metrics. But if we can actually bring in good, high quality M&E, what we call, we can actually be able to drive much greater accountability and performance measurement systems and greater results in the social sector. So I would say this is a big area of opportunity in the social sector. By the way, if we do this, I also believe that we will attract far greater funding, because if people are able to see better results, where their money is going, how it is bringing change, they will actually invest more. This is true, by the way, for the governments as well. If we have more outcome-based budgeting as opposed to outlays, I think you'll see much better efficiency in the government. So I think the social sector is no different. I think this is a big area. I think the second is talent management. My view is that the social sector has a big opportunity for just much better talent management systems. There are lots of people out there who want to do good, who would love to find a way to work in this area. There are many things that prevent them from working in this area. Compensation policies, culture, the way organizations are organized, and I think just getting all some of these issues addressed, I think could be a big opportunity in my mind. So I would say those two are certainly big opportunities. I would say both these, by the way, come into what we call capacity building of organizations itself. It's a big area we focus on. Investing in the core of what the organization is and strengthening that, in my mind, is a big opportunity. And it doesn't come intuitively to donors. Every donor wants to give money to the program, which is, if it's an organization involved in feeding the child, they will ask the question, how much does it take to feed a child? And they don't want to then give money to the central overhead. It's completely opposite of how we build companies. If it's an organization involved in surgeries, they'll say, how much does it cost to do the surgery? They won't give money for running the central overhead of the hospital. It's exactly the opposite of how we build organizations. So I think understanding the core of the organization and funding that, those components of it, I think, are very valuable.
I completely agree. Staff salaries while fundraising has always been a challenge. Putting them into proposals.
Yeah, so we do a lot of. For example, we support a lot of organizations where, when they come to us for money, we actually instead, sponsor, the salary of the fundraising person, as opposed to give the money for the program itself.
Absolutely, I think, and that's very impactful. That actually, is a step towards sustaining them in the future. One question, which is more closer to a direct question to you, is how would this from Ingrid Johnson? How do you describe your leadership style?
I think that's for others to describe. I'm not so sure. I would be a good person, Ingrid, to answer that question.
Okay. All right. The next question is
Yuvraj Srivastav's question earlier. He is the HR head for Make My Trip.
Oh, wow. That's company run by my good friend, Deep.
Yes.
So Yuvraj says, why is it so that the most of the corporates still drive social responsibility as organizational agenda or as an engagement program? That's the first part of the question. How can organizations drive and make their workforce more socially responsible, more of mission around individual social responsibility, driven on their own volition, rather than nudged by organizations? I'll break that down. I'll repeat the first part. Why is it that corporates still have to drive social responsibility as an organizational agenda?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's not just a corporate issue, right? It's a citizen issue. Because at the end of the day, corporates are nothing but manifestation of all of us. So we got to ask ourselves, why is it any different for for a corporate? I mean, and so I've always wondered why this is the case. I mean, some corporates obviously are somewhat more different. I do think that I've observed that leadership matters. DNA, of course, matters, but leadership matters. I think if organizations evolve a particular way, if leaders are seen as behaving in a particular way, then I think some traits become infectious over time. But even then, it's not necessarily that easy, because as organizations become very big, they start mimicking the rest of the nation. And I think, so it's not that easy, to do this, and to have behavior which is socially responsible amongst all individuals. I mean, if you want that, and you're going to make that your prime hiring condition, you'll really be kind of that's likely, you'll be ruling out a lot of people in your workforce. So I've never come across an organization that says that if my employee doesn't exhibit this character trait, I'm actually going to ding this person in their yearly appraisal. But I do think that if people are seen as see their leaders behave in a particular way, I think people try to mimic their leaders, or at least a large number of people will try to mimic their leaders.
Sure. And this actually then loops back to the whole organization values and how we run them through a performance management system. It's
yes,
food for thought.
Yeah, but it's still not. It's not easy. I don't think it's easy. It's very, very difficult. I mean, just because Jamshedji Tata did what he did, does it mean every person at the Tata Group, feels that they should basically do exactly the same in terms of their giving philosophy? No, they will still be, they'll follow the Tata Code of Ethics, but are they going to be really giving people? No, it is. I mean, I think these are very difficult things to, especially that's my point, that as organizations become really big, it becomes very difficult to do these things.
Yeah. Vineet Taneja's question.
Sure. The next question is from Vineet Taneja. He asked, if you had to guide the listeners to an appropriate approach to discovering and manifesting their deeper calling, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say two things. It's a very good question, Vineet. I would say, my suggestions would be twofold. First is that there is great value to introspection. Many people don't invest in introspection. You can try whatever form of introspection works for you. In Hindi we call it dhyan. In Buddhism it's called vipassana. You try any form of meditation, but it's very valuable, to spend some time with yourself periodically, and introspect and think about issues that are important, and also just calm your mind down and think peacefully. I think there is great value in that. I think the second is, I'm a big believer in experiential learning. I think often I have seen a lot of people suffer from, paralysis by analysis. Okay. There is great value to going out and, whatever you want to try to do, try it, even if it is at small scale. I think you need to try it. So if you try it, I think, then you can double down if you like it more and do more of it thereafter, etc. So I would say those would be my two recommendations.
And Niveda, one of our students' questions, please, Priyam.
Sure. So Niveda is asking, what would be the three things that you suggest to do to make future leaders, the younger generation, she says, realize that the importance of social responsibility and drive the outcome-based on the 3 Ps, profit, planet, and people, rather than focus on profits alone?
I think it's a very good question. I think in my mind, the two things that anyone should do is travel. Okay. And by travel, I don't mean, go and see exotic locations. You can always do that as well. I love that kind of travel as well. But I think by travel, I mean, just go around and just see what is happening. Okay. I feel that I have been shaped by a lot of what I have seen. If you're based in Mumbai and you're where I am, which is South Mumbai, you just need to travel 7 kilometers and see the M ward, where life expectancy is less than 40 years, in a country where life expectancy is over 70 years. How is it that in the richest city of the country, in the richest part of the country, that 7 kilometers from where you stay, life expectancy can drop by 30 years? How can it be, right? You just need to travel 7 kilometers to experience that. How many people would have actually gone and spent a few hours to understand why that is the case? It's just, you need to go 45 minutes and spend 3 hours to understand why that is the case. You need to travel overnight from Mumbai into Marathwada by train and understand why Marathwada is the suicide capital of the country. You've got to go to Beer district and understand why farmers every year for the past many decades kill themselves, right? You just need to do that, right? You need to just travel. I'm from Punjab. You need to travel the length and breadth of Punjab to understand why, from being the richest state in the country 2 decades ago, today it's number 13, right? You just need to do that, right? And you'll understand when you interact with people why that is the case. If you travel, you learn a lot. Of course, I can tell you, as I'm a foodie, when you travel, you get great experiences as well. So it's not that all this travel depresses you. I enjoy my travels enormously as well, but it gives you a lot of perspective. So that's the first thing I encourage people is just travel. You get a lot of perspective when you travel, right? The second thing is meet interesting people. I'm very fortunate that I don't hang out much with just business leaders. Most of my friends are either doctors or social sector leaders. They are the ones I've spent time with for the last 25 years of my life. I have very few friends in the social sector, in the business community. And when you have friends in the social sector, that shapes your perspective on what the real world is and what the challenges are. Why is there so much violence against women in our country? Why do we have urban governance issue? Why really has life expectancy in Delhi fallen by 3 years in the last few years? And why will it continue to fall if we don't do something again to change it? Right? These are all addressable issues, and we need to just focus on them. Right? How do we raise the water table in different parts of the country? So if you meet interesting people, you realize there are interesting solutions, and there are people, passionate people, who could actually earn the crores that many of us earn. And these are people who are far smarter than us, but they choose to do what they do. right? And you'll enjoy, talking to all these people. So those are the two things I would suggest that people do,
Wonderful.
travel and meet these people.
Wonderful. I think it's time to close the conversation. So Priyam, your closing comments before I summarize.
I'm still going to react to the last answer. It was a beautiful answer. I don't think I've ever heard such a simple yet it's so obvious that if you just take a few steps away from your house and you interact with people, make friends with people who are different than us, how it can just change our life within minutes. Something that Gautam Buddha did. If you think about it in one way, he also took foot and just saw and observed and interacted. That has been actually quite my aha moment, if I must say.
Guru Nanak traveled 29,000 kilometers on foot in one life.
Correct. So, Amit, what a joy to be in your presence today. Here are the 5 things I learned with you and from you today. First, the mother is the first guru.
Yes.
Your mother taught you that the most valuable aspect was to share and to give. And it was not the material aspect. You defined it in a very beautiful way. The act of giving is not just to give money, it's to give yourself and share. The first aspect. Second, you said that right through your education, you had a deep sense of gratitude for what you were given. You were given a scholarship, you were given opportunities to study overseas. And you had a sense of gratitude that therefore, right from the young age in your life, you said this gratitude must be expressed in your beginning a practice of gratitude through sharing. Number 3, you went to the West, and many people are impacted in many different ways in America, but you were impacted by a very powerful observation. You said there are institutions of eminence and excellence which have all come up because people cared enough and people gave. And you noticed that. You could have noticed other things, but you noticed this aspect in America. Number 4, you came back and said, when I begin my career, when I begin to work, and you achieved the so-called success as we define it in a narrow word, but you were honest enough to yourself and you said there is some emptiness in that kind of success. So you were fortunate that you were able to notice that and you were able to listen to the knock from within. And so you began this journey. You think in a goal-oriented way. So you say you define a goal, use the power of logic, but you also have the humility to say 3 kinds of thinking: logical thinking, lateral thinking, out-of-box thinking. You do that. And lastly, just observing you, you were very honest. You didn't seem to give any ready-made answers. There was no prep with you earlier. I had not practiced with you what you are going to speak. You spoke straight from the heart and you didn't pretend to have all the answers, but you said, let's make an attempt. And the biggest thing that will remain with me is all these large problems around us, there is a possible solution when we care to go out there, care to learn about the context, and then care to make the first step. So thanks a lot, Amit. It's been an absolute joy to be in your presence. Thank you very much for investing this hour of your time with us.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you so much. Pleasure being here.